Thank you, Mr. President. As the state is finding out recently from news reports about this new social vulnerability index that the state is using through the health departments to decide how to distribute the vaccine, they're finding out things that they never could have conceived is going on in terms of this important vaccine that needs to go to the most vulnerable. The social vulnerability index uses factors, social factors, to determine how many vaccines one area gets over another area. This can create, and I believe is creating, deadly consequences. The simple fact is that the city of Detroit is getting more vaccines than its neighbors. In fact, they're getting so many more that they are now offering vaccines to lower priority populations. There's scores in terms of how high a priority you are in Detroit. They have offered that higher priority, the vaccines, to the point where now they're dropping in priority. This month, the city of Detroit announced that those with intellectual or developmental disabilities are eligible for the COVID vaccine regardless of the age. We know the age is the #1 factor. Hakem Berry, Detroit's chief operating officer, told WXYZ yesterday that the Detroit can now expand eligibility. They can expand to other lesser priority groups because the high-risk population, they've all been given the chance to have the vaccine. That's wonderful that they have got that chance to get the vaccine in Detroit. Now they can drop down to less vulnerable populations. In fact, a 40-year-old who is hearing impaired in Detroit, hearing impaired only, can get the vaccine, but that same person, that same hearing impaired person in Oakland, Macomb, or Washington, they cannot get that vaccine. Meanwhile, the vaccines are short in Oakland County. Seniors in my district have been screaming for this vaccine, demanding. I've talked to so many of my senior centers that say, we can't get the vaccine. They'll be interested to know why. So last week, the Detroit Health Department found out that they are going to get more doses than Oakland County with far less population. You heard that right. When seniors are most at risk to COVID and are struggling to get the vaccine, the state of Michigan is failing them with their social engineering policies, not the likelihood of death. Some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have pointed to the fact that there's a lower percentage of Detroit residents who have been vaccinated than in Oakland County. That shows the importance of sending the vaccines to Detroit. But the difference in vaccine interest is not the point. The number of people who decline to be vaccinated is not the point. It misses the point by a mile. When the priority groups have been offered the vaccine, then in Detroit they move on, as I just described, to the lower priority risk, the ones that are not as likely to die, because Detroit has received so many more vaccines, they have to adjust to try to get them all out. They've moved on past the seniors, like in Oakland County, in my district, that can't get the vaccine. It's mind-boggling. Let's look at the statistics from the Department of Health and Human Services. We just looked them up. In Michigan, almost 90% of COVID deaths are those over 60 years of age, almost 90% over 60. And this isn't enough for us to target that population and not use how much money you make or what kind of apartment you live in. It should be, what is your risk of dying? As I've said before, and I'll say it again, this is what happens when politicians and bureaucrats start making decisions on politics and not science and common sense. There should be nothing controversial in preventing the state from using race, gender, and socioeconomic factors instead of the real harm, the possible death, in deciding to distribute this vaccine. And yet there remain some who support continuing this nonsense. This is why it's so difficult getting the vaccine to the most vulnerable. This should not be controversial. This is common sense. Maybe common sense is lacking in this town. Standing up for our seniors, those with health complications, and those those most at risk of dying of COVID should be a no-brainer. This should not be a partisan fight. It shouldn't be about Republicans versus Democrats. It should be about the group coming together to help those who are the most vulnerable. And that, by this proposal, is not being done. Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like my comments printed in the Journal.